What is web authentication? Before we look at the definition, let's understand where we will use web authentication. Web authentication is typically used by customers who want to deploy a guest access network. It is commonly used in wireless hotspot locations like airports, libraries, hotels, etc. to provide secure wireless access to a guest user. When web authentication is enabled on a wireless LAN, the controller blocks all traffic from the client with the exception of DHCP and DNS traffic until the client successfully authenticates with a username and password. As we can see from the description, it is a simple authentication method which does not need a supplicant or a client utility. There are three types of web authentication that can be configured on a Cisco wireless LAN controller. Internal web authentication, which is the default web authentication method and uses the internal web page on the controller for authentication. Web authentication can also be done using a customized login page that can be downloaded to the controller. And alternatively, web authentication can be done using a customized login page stored on an external web server. Now that we have seen the basics of web authentication and the types of web authentication, let's look at some of the details of the web authentication process. That is, what happens behind the scenes when a user tries to access a guest network configured for web authentication. We will look at the process with internal web authentication configured on the network. Alright, this is the network setup we will use for this discussion. We have a Cisco wireless LAN client which is connected to the guest network through a lightweight access point which is in turn connected to the wireless LAN controller. We have not included the lightweight access point in this network diagram since the lightweight access point just acts as a pass-through between the wireless client and the controller. As soon as the user connects to the guest network, the user opens a web browser and types in a URL. For example, let's say the user types guest.com. The wireless LAN client sends a DNS request to get the IP address of this URL. When the packet reaches the wireless LAN controller, the controller forwards the packet to the DNS server. The DNS server resolves the DNS name guest.com to IP address and sends the DNS response to the client via the controller. Great. Now the client knows the IP address of guest.com and as a next step initiates a TCP connection by sending a TCP sync packet destined to the IP address of guest.com. When this packet reaches the wireless LAN controller, the controller proxies for guest.com and sends back a TCP sync acknowledgement packet to the client with the source address as the IP address of guest.com. The client completes a three-way handshake by sending an acknowledgement packet and the TCP connection is fully established. Next, the wireless client sends an HTTP GET packet destined for guest.com. The wireless LAN controller intercepts this packet and sends it for redirectional handling. The HTTP application gateway prepares a HTML body and sends it back as a reply to the HTTP GET requested by the client. This HTML makes the client go to the default web authentication page of the wireless LAN controller at https virtual-interface-ip/login.html. The wireless client closes the existing TCP connection by sending a TCP FIN packet and initiates a fresh TCP connection with the virtual interface IP address of the wireless LAN controller. The client completes the TCP three-way handshake with the virtual interface IP address of the wireless LAN controller and establishes the TCP connection. Finally, the client sends a HTTP GET for login.html destined to 1.1.1.1 in order to request for a login page. This request is allowed up to the web server of the wireless LAN controller and the server responds back with the default login page. The client receives the login page on the browser window where the user can provide the username and password and log in. Let's put all the pieces together and look at an example packet capture of the web authentication process. In our example, we use a wireless LAN client with IP address 10.78.177.47. The first packet is the Dns Query Packet. We notice that the client is requesting for the IP address of guest.com. The DNS server replies with the DNS response packet which tells the client the IP address of guest.com. Then we see a set of packets which is the TCP three-way handshake that the client establishes with the guest.com IP address. As we have seen earlier, the wireless LAN controller proxies on behalf of guest.com at this stage. This is the TCP sync packet which is sent by the client to the guest.com IP address. This is the sync acknowledgement packet which is sent by the controller proxying for guest.com to the client. and this is the acknowledgement packet sent by the client. Next, we see the HTTP GET packet sent by the client requesting for the web page on guest.com. This is intercepted by the wireless LAN controller, and as we learned earlier, the controller prepares the HTML body which will redirect the client to the login page on the controller at the virtual interface IP/login.html. The next set of packet shows the client establishing a HTTPS connection by completing the TCP three-way handshake with the virtual interface IP address 1.1.1.1. The client has to validate the server certificate or ignore it in order to bring up the SSL tunnel. The login web page is sent through this SSL tunnel. The rest of the packet capture shows the transactions that happen inside the SSL tunnel. Alright, we have seen the web authentication process in detail, and we have also looked at the packet captures. I know it's a lot of information that we have covered so far, so let's look at a quick summary of the entire process. Okay, this is the web authentication process summary. I would request everyone to pause the video here and read these points and recollect the concepts that we have seen so far. Now we come to the easiest part of the video, configuring wireless LAN controllers for web authentication. Configuring web authentication on controllers is very simple. It's a two-step process. First, we need to select the type of web authentication and then enable web authentication on a wireless LAN. To select the web authentication type, click on Security from the wireless LAN controller GUI, select Web Auth, and then Web Login page. On this page, you can define the type of web authentication using the pull-down menu. It could be internal, which is the default, or could be customized or external. Let's select internal and apply. The next step is to create a wireless LAN and enable web authentication. To do this, click